First of all, thank you once again. We have an esteemed set of panelists today for this particular session. I'll be your moderator. So I'll start with a quick round of introductions, and then we will open the panel for this conversation today. And I can see that there are a lot of very familiar as well as experienced folks around here. I would request you to also kind of keep this as an open discussion or a forum for an open discussion. Feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions to ask, or you could also put it towards the end. So to start with, an introduction from my side, my name is Bharat Chaddha. I'm a partner with KPMG in India. I specifically focus on digital solutions, and I work in the telecom sector as one of my key focus areas. With me, I'm joined by folks from both the OEM side as well as from the mobility side. And so that's what we're going to be talking about during this particular session on affordable devices. So first, I would like to introduce Mr. Sachin. He's a senior director from Qualcomm. We have Mr. Prateek. He's head of devices, innovations, and 5G at Airtel. And we have Mr. Praveen. He's a vice president with Tata Communications. Okay, so with that round of introductions, I will set the context for this particular session. As the session states, or as the header goes, it's a topic about affordable devices for future-proofing India's success. In order to speak about this particular area, we're thinking about putting it into three different aspects. So one is on the end user, the consumer. We have certain statistics that basically allow us to understand that only 10% of the smartphones right now within the country are about 5G enabled, so to say, but we have some more conversations around that. We have about 600 million smartphone users within the country. Also, we have about 350 million who are still on the 2G spectrum, or they're using 2G services. So the point that we will try and address in this would be that how do we, first of all, make this entire generation of users adopt 5G? How do we get the devices more affordable so that they're ubiquitous across this entire segment of users? How do we upgrade these specific consumers? How do we make sure that the consumer experience, everything is to that mark that we expect it to be, to put us at a global level? And hence, there will be a huge amount of interaction and the kind of contribution the manufacturing sector, the telecommunication manufacturing sector needs to play what come through. And so we have some panelists who are going to talk about that. It is going to be important how we roll out the entire 5G network across the country. It will be important to ensure that while the manufacturers are working on various different kind of devices across the spectrum, whether it is on the mobility side or on the IoT side, how do we make sure that these devices are made in India, following the Atmanirbhar initiative that the government has, also to make sure that they are finally affordable, the tariff plans do not get too impacted by the underlying technology itself. And in order to finally have all of this come together as an ecosystem would be the underlying platform. The platform itself would have to kind of be upgraded or enhanced in that manner so that both the consumer side and the manufacturing side can actually interact quite seamlessly. And that is the key for future-proofing as well. How do we make sure that we do not have the challenges that we faced in the past, where the certain adoption of the spectrum, the 4G spectrum, took us a few years to catch up with the global levels. Also, at the same time, and I'm kind of repeating the topic again, and with that I'll open up to make it affordable and available. So it has to be keeping in mind the kind of purchasing power parity that we have across the country, and at the same time making it available across so that whether it is the rural or the urban segment, we are able to bring all the users across on the platform using 5G, innovating on top of it, and taking it further to make sure that the country is a digital success and a leader in the digital era itself. So with that context, I'll open the panel now. And once again, thank you to the panelists for joining us. We have a list of questions that we would like to take the audience through. So I will put the first question out, and then I'll request the panelists to chip in. The first question is for all the panelists. So maybe we will start with Prateek, and then we'll come this way. So the first question is about how is the current device ecosystem matured? How has the device ecosystem matured within the country? And how do we feel is the future going to be for the device ecosystem? So it's a generic question. Prateek, if you would like to start with that.
Thanks, Bharat, first of all, for setting the context. So, guys, I think, in my opinion, the device ecosystem in the last few years has been evolving pretty rapidly. I think few highlights, obviously, is that in last 4 years, a bulk of manufacturing now has shifted inside India. In fact, in a lot of cases, we are now exporting devices, which is with a very stark difference from last 4 years back when a lot of these devices used to just get imported into the country. I think monthly we sell good 14, 15 million devices. Now there's a 550 million, 600 million people still sitting on smartphones. So a big base already. And though there is some work to be done in terms of moving 300 million people to smartphones from feature phones, the story on smartphones has been great. Also in terms of specifications, in terms of features, etc., there has been a lot of innovation that has happened in this space. And also the good part is that with the penetration of Flipkart, Amazon, etc., a lot of these smartphones are now also getting delivered and ordered from small towns and cities. It's not just the big metros in the top cities where these are restricted. So overall, a very good picture in my opinion here.
Thank you. Sachin, if you would like to.
Hello?
Yeah.
So when we really look at devices, smartphone is obviously one category, but there are other types of devices also, be it semi-fi routers, dongles, etc., right? And then the IoT devices. So the whole category can be looked at it together. On the smartphone side itself, we have come a really long way. 600 million plus install base of smartphones. Doesn't matter 4G or 5G. The ecosystem of smartphones exists. Of course, we cannot ignore the 350 million or 300 odd million feature phones. That's where a lot of us have to work together to see how we can elevate them to the next level, how we migrate them to, say, 4G first, and then eventually to 5G. So there is a job cut out for the ecosystem here to make that migration happen. And while we are doing that, the smartphone existing ecosystem, which is primarily around 4G, how do we migrate it to 5G? The good thing is, the migration to 5G is happening way quicker than the migration from 3G to 4G has happened in the past. Already, we have, by the end of this year, we will have roughly 80 to 85 million 5G handsets shipped into the country. So that's a ready base to leverage, right? Which is actually really good for all the operator partners, because the moment you turn on the network, there is someone ready to consume it. The success of any technology depends upon how it gets consumed. And devices are the way that you consume a wireless technology, right? So the wider adoption of these smartphones, MiFi routers, dongles. Now with 5G coming in, we will have opportunities for fixed wireless access as well through millimeter wave. So all these need to happen. We have some ways to go, but I think the good start is already made. So I think there is a bright future for us. We are not way behind the way we were in 4G. We are still right on time in terms of 5G. The ecosystem is yet to fully mature. We will be contributing to that ecosystem development and lend even Indianness to that ecosystem essentially. So I think overall a great thing for India and consumers.
Thanks, Sachin. I'll give a flavor from an IoT perspective. Especially the devices, the maturity in the ecosystem has evolved over the last couple of years. It involves three key elements. One is the design, the other is the manufacturing, and third is ensuring the validation and the upscale or take of it in India. On the design side, the strength, the device, even manufacturers and design houses and OEMs have built up in India is significant. In fact, if you look at all the major multinationals, they have the presence in-house here in India from a design perspective. You name it any, you will find a design house available in India. So that is of age we have come to that maturity. Now the component manufacturing as being set up will give a tremendous boost to build these devices in India. A lot of players are right now, are from an IoT perspective, like even ourselves, we are getting that manufactured in India, and we are even exporting. So it's about design in India, build in India, and even export, build for global market. So it is fairly matured, and I'm very upbeat about it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So essentially that brings me a little deeper into this particular topic, and I want us to touch upon how the current device ecosystem is geared up for the computing as well as the processing or the power requirement from the usage or the usability point of view. This question is for Praveen and Sachin. Maybe we can start with Praveen and then we can go to Sachin. And so the question is about, do you feel that the current devices in the market are geared up in terms of their capabilities to address the demand and the expectations?
To address it, absolutely. And how, I will explain it. The affordability of the devices is the key. In India, I'm sure all of us have witnessed, even if you look at buying anything, even for a personal or an industrial need, we do research at 10 places, even if it's a few hundred rupees cheaper, we go and buy from there. That's the frugality we are driving in India. And with that mindset, the India, especially the market, if we look at an Indian market, it's a huge market of 130 crores of people who are going to be users. Maybe some may be having not just one device. Each one has to carry 2 or 3 devices. We'll be connected in smart homes. We'll be connected in industrial environment in an IoT perspective. We will be interacting with the human to human, human to machine to machine type of communications. The ecosystem is very large. So on an average, when we look at this, roughly in any of these ecosystem, roughly for any solution or services, 50% of the cost is device cost. Unless that is affordable, the scalability becomes a challenge. And that's where the Indian ecosystem, where the frugality is being taken care of, each and every feature is being looked into on how will it contribute to the value to the end user that's how the system is being developing. And if you look from a manufacturing side standpoint, the manufacturing setups have been there. Now they are scaling up even for large scale production. You would have heard in the media in the recent past also how the ecosystem is scaling to build those up. And I like Sachin also to add, maybe then.
Thanks. So, bunch of things. This phone is the most powerful device in your hands today. In terms of its processing power, computing power, features, etc., it is way more powerful than many computers existing today, right? And in terms of the usefulness also of that device, it's very powerful. Over the period of time, newer features, services are getting enabled. We have seen the journey through 4G, how new features and services come. With 5G, yet another journey is going to begin. What is happening is, in order to avail those services, since people have already understood the value of that technology and the benefits accrued by that technology, people are demanding more memory, more storage, because everyone is trying to capture more and store more. They are demanding longer usability basically through the day. So battery becoming important, display is becoming important. All this is actually lending to a beautiful user experience. Obviously, when you increase some of these things, the price goes up. But that price going up typically becomes a short-term factor, and as the scale matures or starts developing, prices start stabilizing. So affordability eventually starts happening. I think we are at that cusp right now where people have started experiencing, I need 4 GB minimum or whatever, right? Not because you cannot do something with 3 GB, but the experience with 4 GB may be better, because now you are maybe, instead of using a HD video, you want to use a full HD or a 4K video, because 5G will be able to deliver that. Even today, you can come up with a 7,000 rupee, for example, a 5G device, a smartphone, but it may be a 5.5-inch display. Who wants to use it? That's one part of the consumer experience. So the collectively what we have to look at in terms of the type of services and features that get enabled by a device. Per service, are we reducing the cost for a user so that eventually when sort of the volume or the scale develops, it starts making sense to the consumer. And I believe that journey is already happening. We have seen when phones came to India, 5G phones came to India in 2020, those were almost 25,000 and up. Last year, those came down to say 20 or 18,000. This year, we have seen phones coming up to 13,000, 12,000 rupees. Next year, it will come down for. So it's going through that normal, natural journey, and we believe over the next couple of years, it will come down even in price point. So I think it is already happening there, but at the cost of saying most affordable, want to make sure that people do not compromise on the user experience, because the full benefit of the technology gets understood only through a proper user experience, essentially.
Thank you. So a very interesting takeaway here is that we are already on that journey. So what I understand is that we, as an ecosystem, as a nation, the demand is obviously there. We are so internally or intrinsically led by the demand that we already have. We don't really need to kind of have dependency on any other. Second thing I understood was that the devices are also to that level of delivering that capability for this particular demand. So hence, in this entire ecosystem, what really is important is the play the government has, or the role the government plays with it. So this question is for you, Prateek. Since from a mobility standpoint, and as we've heard from the panel that the power is in the hands with in terms of smartphones. So Prateek, how do you think the industry and the government can work together better to deliver this promise to the nation?
Yeah, so I'll also take just a minute to also set some more context here. So we spoke about the numbers. Broadly, in a country of 1400 million, there are broadly 900 million people who use mobile devices. Out of them, broadly 350 million people are still on feature phones, which are the keypad phones primarily. And obviously around 550 million people are on smartphones. Now, organically every year, only around 40 million people move from feature phone to smartphones. Now, by that rate, it's a problem, because it will take 7 to 8 years for everybody to actually move from a feature phone to smartphone. And if anything, as Sachin elaborated, the entry price point for smartphones have been moving up very sharply, and it is because of the amount of features which are now kind of getting available on these devices. So again, as a data point, till 2019, the average selling price of smartphones in India used to be around 12K, which this year is already 18.5K. That's been the kind of jump. Another data point, devices less than 10K used to be 50% of all shipments in India till 2019. This year, that number has already dropped below 20%. That's how drastic the kind of shift in both the feature specifications as well as the price points are. So that's where we are. So problem is, how do we move these 300 million odd people quickly to smartphones? And then a subset of that problem then will be, how do we move quickly people from 4G to 5G? So I think that's the problem statement now. Now, there are a couple of things that you can do ideally. And first of all, let's figure out the reason why is the movement from feature phones to smartphones slow. So I think the primary reason, obviously, all of us understand, is affordability. The feature phone is still a good quality feature phone, is available as low as, let's say, 800 rupee. Or let's say a good Nokia Samsung feature phone actually is available at 1,000-1,200 rupee price point. While a good quality smartphone now starts at around 7K, 8K, minus obviously the big billion day sales, etc. So obviously a huge delta there. Another problem is that these 300 million people broadly are all new to credit customers. They don't have a credit profile, they don't borrow essentially, and they don't essentially have a CIBIL score, etc. And hence, we do have device financing companies, the likes of Bajaj Finance, Home Credit, etc. But they don't essentially strongly address this 300 million people base. And they don't essentially have a way to take loans also to come on a smartphone. So I think there are a couple of things which we, for example, as Airtel kind of do to accelerate this movement from feature phones to smartphones. So I think one initiative, as I said, is to closely work with these device lending companies to enable loans to people who want to upgrade to smartphones. I think one value add that is telco we bring, which is slightly difficult for the outer world to kind of provide, is that we have visibility on our feature phone customers. So for example, I know that this particular customer on feature phone with Airtel has been paying his bill for last 3 years. And hence there is some sense of his credit eligibility, so to say. And we kind of work very closely with these lenders to be able to underwrite this base and hence extend an affordability loan to these people. Then we work very, very closely with all the OEMs ecosystem on how to improve the proposition on devices. And there are two parts to it. One is how do you reduce the upfront cost of the device, which is by, let's say, giving some bit of cashback, some bit of offer which reduces the upfront purchase price for the device. There is obviously stuff that we do on reducing the cost of telco plan for the customer, because once you come on a smartphone, you also have to spend a lot on the telco plan. And then the third bigger cost bucket for a customer who's upgrading to a smartphone is the maintenance cost of a smartphone, because obviously a feature phone screen can get replaced in 500 rupee, but a smartphone screen might take 2,000, 3,000 rupee to get replaced. So even services like free screen replacement, etc., are essentially something that helps a feature phone customer to move to a smartphone. So I think these are a few things that we do from an affordability point of view. There is another big aspect around the education of importance of a smartphone. And the good part is that smartphone literacy, so to say, is not a problem. So a lot of feature phone customers actually know how to use a smartphone. They've seen a smartphone in their friends, family circle, etc. They are quite comfortable with it actually. But the problem is that they still consider smartphone a luxury. So for them, it's an unnecessary spend. You're doing it for probably entertainment, content, social media, WhatsApp, etc. I think the need of the hour also is to educate these people, the customers who are sitting on feature phone, saying that a smartphone actually unlocks a lot of other things for you. It unlocks access to health, banking, education, upskilling, employment, etc. And I think that is one piece which, if that education kind of happens, will definitely see a faster pace of acceleration from feature phones to smartphone. Bharat, specifically to your point on what can we do to work with the government to kind of enable this, is I think one direct thing. So indirectly, government has been running these PLI schemes, and I think we'll discuss about that in slightly more detail. But also directly, I think we have seen some government initiatives to be able to give some subsidies directly to people who are on feature phones to smartphones. There also where telco adds value, and from Airtel we have done a few of these projects, is that again we have exact visibility on who the exact feature phone customer is, because when you are running such a subsidy program, you don't want there to be a leakage, and you don't want an existing smartphone user to abuse that subsidy from the government. And I think that's where, again, a telco can provide a value in terms of sharpshooting these feature phone customers and handholding them to get to a smartphone.
Thank you so much. So a lot of information available very, very quickly from Prateek. So just to summarize, from a government standpoint, we'll talk about a little more. We'll double click on that along with Sachin also. But I think a key takeaway for me was on the aspects on how the industry is working with the OEM manufacturers or the OEM itself to make sure that the smartphones, feature phones are geared up for the Indian requirement and then the Indian demand as well as the expectation from a user experience standpoint. I also had a very interesting takeaway on what we are trying to do in educating the nation in understanding what is the use of smartphones. It's not only about utilizing certain features, but how do you utilize it to enhance your life from a healthcare standpoint. And so that also brought me to another takeaway, which is how the ecosystem is expanded into fintech and a few other companies in the financial and the lending space to come into this entire ecosystem to help affordability and accessibility of these particular devices to the population. So to double click on the government's role in all of this. So we had a little bit talked a little bit about PLI, but Sachin, what do you feel? How are these initiatives really coming up? Do you think that they are really adding value? Is there anything that the government can do better, or can the industry do better to bring these particular initiatives out there?
So I think one big thing government has already done is the availability of large quantity of spectrum. Because without spectrum, we will not be talking about any of this thing, right? We have seen our operators had to work with limited 4G spectrum, and you guys have done tremendous job, because India is a country where we have huge population density, huge user density per cell site. Consumption of data per user per month is also among the highest in the world, and operators have done tremendous job, but still there is a physical limit to how much a base station can carry. Government, by opening up say, spectrum in all the different bands and enough quantity of spectrum has already done a good foundation basically to roll out the 5G services. Now, beyond this, it is up to us, up to the ecosystem to take advantage of some of the schemes which government has put together, whether it is in the form of a semiconductor program which can help India in the long term, in the form of PLI and DLI programs which are going to help in the immediate term, right? Somewhere this has to actually come all together to benefit the overall local ecosystem, right? And that's where design in India is going to be very, very critical. Having local startups, etc., encouraging them to bring out use cases which are beneficial to not only individuals but also to enterprises, that's also going to be beneficial, important. And I think that's where government and the industry can work together to give that push and create a wholesome experience and bring out the total usefulness of the technology to the consumer basically.
Thanks, Sachin. So, we have to segue from here because we have to, when we talk about usefulness and bringing those schemes specific to the end user, one of the key aspects around all of that is that how are we empowering the user and also protecting the user? So the next question is for you, Praveen, specifically talking about the concerns, security concerns and all such, which OEMs and a lot of other organizations have to face and answer to the end user. How do you think we are geared up for that? How are we protecting the user, end user, and how are we moving forward with the kind of processes that we are dealing with to address this in the future as well?
Definitely. Security gives everyone sleepless nights, be it an individual, be it a CXO in the organization, or maybe a end user itself, right? So one of the key things, if we break this down, there are different components involved. One is the, say in the whole ecosystem of the value chain, one is a device, right? It can be a smartphone, it can be a IoT device, or it can be any other interfacing device. Second, the data gets transmitted through a network layer. So that's a network. Third is the network platform or the application platform where the data gets assimilated, followed by the application where the end user actually uses. It can be again a device. It can be your computer or a handheld mobile phone, which is a smartphone. So all these stages need to be tightly integrated in the security. So there are different levels of security which is being taken care, which is at the device level. It may be hardware enabled. How the data transmits may be encryption level. How it is consumed within the platform, it's a secured layer and the layers of various layers of how we proactively monitor those attacks. So are there preventive attacks? How do you sense a breach of say your outermost layer? So something I'll give you an analogy there. Say it's around five rings of circles encircling your core data. Around that, once you have your, like in the Star Wars movies you would have seen, right? So any attacks coming from the outside, one is able to detect those attacks and can really ward it off. That's the level of security that's getting embedded right now. And from a personal data standpoint, it's all secured because those are something which are also regulatory driven. So at all these stages, rest assures as an individual, the data is secured. But yes, to monitor this, there's a lot that goes behind the scenes, which all the organizations, from the hardware provider to the device provider to the network to the platform to the applications, everybody is providing that. The beauty is how well we are integrating the end service who is giving it becomes the key. How all these security elements are tightly tied together, are integrated together to provide a common security layer to the end user. So I think with that, India is very evolved in terms of various mechanisms because the number of threats runs into billions. And the way one is able to capture is through all the staying ahead of those. And those type of research are going on, especially on a daily basis to stay ahead of that curve. So threats will always be there. The beauty lies in terms of being ahead of that. And that's where all the research is going on, and where in our ecosystem as well, we are trying to assess and being ahead of that curve always.
Thank you. On the lighter note, I really love references to Star Wars whenever there are any. So thanks for that, Prateek. Praveen, sorry. Prateek, we have this question for you specifically because when you spoke about how you as an organization work with various different OEMs, manufacturers to help making sure that the features in the smartphones are geared up with the Indian mentality and the requirements. Do you feel that two parts to this question? Do you feel that the current legacy devices, where because we have already spent and so has the Indian consumer spent a lot of money in getting them to the 4G network, do you think the current devices are geared up? Do we need a lot of transition and transformation of the legacy operating system and the devices to enable them on the 5G use cases? And the same question, if we can also use to answer on the challenges that are there in the supply chain. So we are talking about the chipset issues, the shortages that are around there. So how would these OEMs or how would, as an ecosystem, we address both of these? One, so just to summarize, transitioning the current user to a 5G use case or a device which can enable that, and secondly, the shortages in the supply chain around the world. How is that going to impact the country, and how will we save ourselves from that point of view? So, please do.
Yeah, Bharat, so we discussed, right? There are still X number of people sitting on feature phones in a country which yesterday launched 5G. So I'm saying in terms of technology, I think the movement will take its own time, and that's because of reasons we spoke. In spite of the fact that last 2 years we have been seeing 5G phones now in the India market, as early as 2020 the shipments started. Even today, only 10% of the base is on 5G smartphones. In terms of flow, in terms of shipments, around 35% of shipments are 5G, which basically means that almost 6 devices out of 10, even sold today, this day, are actually 4G devices. So this switch definitely won't be overnight. The good part is the 4G technology is not going anywhere. To be fair, the 2G technology is not going anywhere in the very near term. And that sense, it doesn't have to be a quick switch. I think so. Somebody, for example, who has bought a 4G device and a perfectly good smartphone, a high-spec smartphone, let's say 3 months back, won't essentially upgrade to a 5G smartphone now in a hurry because the 5G network is there. So I think these device upgrade cycles, and broadly in India, we see around a 2.5 years upgrade cycle on smartphones. So I think that smartphone upgrade cycle will take its time. And accordingly, obviously, it will take some time for people to move to 4G to 5G devices. There's also, by the way, another angle wherein around 80 to 90 million used or refurbished smartphones, so to say, kind of exchange hands in the industry. And we also have to keep this perspective in mind that the 4G devices which are getting sold today, after 2-3 years, will kind of enter the used market. So that ways, from that perspective, it will take even longer for all the 4G devices to get vanished. I think essentially what, from an industry point of view, we should target, and Sachin can probably add more color to this, is the fact that today, from a spec to spec comparison point of view, there is still some delta between a 4G and a 5G device. And hence, there are people, and specifically in the less than 15K or less than 20K price segment, there's still a lot of customers, as I said, 6 out of 10, choosing to buy a 4G device over a 5G device. We are hoping that with the launch of 5G, all of this will quickly get accelerated. Now people will now feel that since 5G is here, we should definitely now buy a 5G phone, and that is what we recommend. But yes, that said, I think it will take some bit of time. Probably in 2024 is when we can expect like 80-90% of the new smartphone shipments to be 5G. It will take whole of next year for us to get to that place. And then is when we'll slightly start seeing the 5G device penetration accelerating very, very fast. Sachin, if you want to add on.
Yeah. So handsets is one story. Then we also see that connectivity is now getting into appliances like, say, smart meters. Then it's also getting into telematics into vehicles, etc. Basically, right? So we have to look at what is the journey of some of these connectivity solutions, and based on that, make a technology choice. Smartphones, as Prateek said, we have, say, maybe a device used for 2 years and then it is handed down. So it also extends the life of the smartphone. So 4 years, probably 5 years, until the smartphone really wears down. It will continue to be used. But good thing is 4G is going to stay. So if not the same user, at least the user who could not afford even a 4G device at some point of their journey, they can make use of that smartphone and elevate themselves from a 2G user experience to a 4G user experience. I think connectivity and broadband specifically has been very transformative to people's lives. So those users, they still need to be served with 4G. Getting them to 5G immediately is going to be a challenge. But at the same time, I think 4G to 5G migration, that should not be as big of a challenge, and that can start happening immediately. Next year, we expect 5G handset shipments to overtake 4G handset shipments, for example. And then you talked about some numbers for 24. So that journey is happening. It's a natural course of migration, no intervention required there. But some of the devices which get deployed for very, very long term. For example, if I'm deploying something in my automotive, which I'm supposed to use for 15 years, I need to think about which technology I should be using, right? Some automakers, they started using 2G as a connectivity solution. No one can guarantee that 2G will stay for 10 years, for example, right? At some point of time, it will completely become unviable to even operate a 2G base station, for example, right? So let's be honest about that. So those decisions we'll have to make, and those are very specific to individual segments, etc., right? Smart meters, you deploy, you're not going to change a meter every 5 years or 10 years. You are used to keeping that smart meters for 15 years probably, right? I mean, we are required to change this today because we think that is a better way of monitoring our, say, energy usage and getting better services. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to use a smart meter as well. So those devices will also need to take a long-term view of the technology and implement that accordingly, essentially.
Thank you so much. So I have one question left, but I can also see that there is some time for Q&A. Why don't we just open this up, take a few questions from you first, and then I will wrap it up. So please do ask questions if you have any. Yes, please. Can we first have that person and then you? If you could just come up front, I'm sorry. Oh, there's a mic there.
Thank you so much, sir. I wanted to ask, while we talked about the end user case, when we're talking about devices, we should also look at the backbone of the whole 5G ecosystem. So right now, as of right now, how do you see the marginal cost of adding a consumer to a 5G network changing for, say, providers such as Airtel or Jio? And so if you could give some insight to that.
Sure. So I can take this. So see, purely in terms of the cost of, for example, let's see the cost of data per GB. Things like this will eventually be cheaper in 5G compared to 4G just because you have a now larger highway to kind of be able to provide that bandwidth. So, and as I said, the movement from 4G to 5G will happen through devices gradually. There is obviously a lot of investment required in terms of a 5G site rollout, etc. But given it's a long-term investment, 15 years, 20 years runway, there is no literally an additional cost, so to say, to get a customer from 4G to 5G. And eventually, as I said, the idea is to be able to kind of further give more data to customers effectively at the same price, if possible. And hence, what I can clarify is 5G won't add a cost essentially from a consumer point of view, at least right away. Yeah.
Thank you.
On this gentleman's behalf, I'm going to ask you a question. Would you require a SIM change to go from 4G to 5G?
No, you won't.
So that's another cost saving.
Yeah.
No additional cost.
Basically, even today, for example, yesterday we announced that we are going live in 8 cities as Airtel. So for example, you go to a 5G site and you have a 5G device and it has the latest software binary from the OEM, from the device manufacturer that supports 5G. Then you right away latch on to the 5G network. There is no action required at your end. Just have to ensure that in the network settings, obviously 5G selection is on, but nothing else required.
Hi, this question is for Praveen. In the beginning, you said, there were 3 components. There was design, there was manufacturing and validation. You spoke about the first 2, but what about validation for IoT systems? I mean, you can have devices which come on the network that it can be almost uncontrolled. So how do you validate and make sure that the devices that are coming on the network are not going to, be greedy, let's say?
Yes. So that's one of the inherent checks that is being done with the platform layer. I spoke about different components, right, from device to network to platform and then to application. The platform holds the key where the validation of the devices takes place. It has multiple layers and roles within that. So it can be your device registration, device enablement, the services that you're subscribed to, what type of bandwidth you're consuming, what's your plan and all that. So comes through that platform layer. And that forms the key in terms of validation. And that's where a lot of, even in our industrial environment, I'll give my example from industry and maybe my co-panelists can add from a mobile perspective. From an industrial device perspective, it becomes a very key validation from the platform itself, so that I'm able to know which type of consumer, which type of initiator, what bandwidth is being used, what subscription he is subscribed to, and how much is he paying, whether I'm enabling that right at the start itself or I'm going to charge him later. All those different layers of services are configured on the platform only. And that is well established right now. See, if to transition from the other networks, it will not take time, because the methodology which exists at a level which has been fundamental to the business.
Great, thank you.
My question is to Prateek. So you said 10% of the smartphone user base is on 5G and around 35% shipments are for 5G. And that's still a low base, right? Now with Airtel 5G and or for that matter, 5G services coming in the country, how do you see telcos, Airtel and other telcos monetizing the consumer 5G base, considering it's still so low?
Interesting question. Something that we are also trying to figure out as we go. See, there are two parts to it. So first of all, monetization can happen on use cases. What else will customer actually be willing to pay for? And I think that is something that we will have to wait and see how these different cases evolve. There are stuff around AR, VR that you can enable through 5G. There is cloud gaming. There is obviously increased speed, reduced latency, etc. And hence there is a better experience on 5G. But as you rightly said, current base is too small for us to right away probably go into monetization. And hence all of these strategies around what pricing, what monetization, etc. and even what use cases actually take hold in the country will only be clear with time. So we have a lot of learnings from global telcos and the markets, because essentially there have been markets where 5G was launched 2-3 years back. And we have seen how the penetration of these services, etc. have gone through. And we also seen multiple strategies that telcos and OEMs around the world have taken on 5G pricing and use cases. But too early to tell for India as to which thing will kind of take hold. And you're right, in terms of penetration, till we reach a certain level, it'll be difficult for us to kind of start monetizing those.
Right, because the use cases that you talked about, the AR, VR and cloud gaming, those seem like primarily the premium smartphone features that would be there, right? Since the Indian market is driven primarily by affordable devices, how would those use cases make sense?
So exactly this. So for example, cloud gaming actually is not a use case for a premium device at all. If you have a premium device, which is a 6 GB RAM, good display, everything perfect, let's say about 20-25K device, you actually can download the game, let's say, and already experience that because you have a good processing unit, so to say. How do you enable the same experience on a 9K or 10K phone, which doesn't have that much RAM or that high quality chipset, for example? That is where cloud gaming actually comes into play, because the actual processing happens in the cloud and it's just basically kind of relaying that back to your phone. So cloud gaming actually is a use case for entry level devices, and all of these things 5G will enable for affordable phones as well.
All right, thank you.
Sorry, I mentioned greedy devices and I'm being greedy with my questions. So, but this one is for Prateek. You mentioned, device financing, right? Have you considered adopting, a control system so that you could actually shut down the phone if the person doesn't pay up? So this is like the pay-as-you-go kind of, that we've seen solar working very well in East Africa, and we're seeing trials in other countries as well for smartphones.
Yeah, so you are also seeing trials in India. So as Airtel, we have launched now 4 projects on this since last year. In fact, as we speak, if you go on Flipkart, there is a Realme C30 model, which already is available with such an Airtel plan. So the way it works is you buy the phone. The Airtel variant is available at a discount of broadly 750 rupee over the open market SKU. And you have to stay with Airtel for 15 months and you have to keep doing X recharge. which if you don't, then after a certain time, the phone locks. Basically, it's exactly the thing that you said. We limit the functionality of the phone. And a good technology, we have seen this taking hold in multiple countries. We are very closely working with Google to basically enable this technology for us. And you can actually enable two use cases basis this. You can lend it to people who otherwise you wouldn't have been able to lend to. So let's say you take a 25%, 30% down payment, and now you are assured of the EMIs, because if they don't pay the EMI, you can restrict the functionality of the device. And you can do an upfront price reduction, because you can ensure that he stays with you for 1.5, 2 years and does the recharge. So this is something that we are already kind of piloting from last 1 year broadly, and hope to scale this up as we move forward.
All right, so we have one last question, please.
Yeah, hi. My question to the panelist is, obviously this is providing affordable devices to the users is a good idea. But another aspect is the safety and the security of the devices. In most of the countries, whenever a product is launched, it goes to certain testing and certification part before it launches in the market. But in India, apart from a couple of products that is covered in the BIS, Bureau of Indian Standard schemes, India is lacking certain regulations. And obviously, a conformity assessment framework is considered as a kind of a regulatory burden before. So how do you ensure that whatever the devices, the 5G devices, because it is not only the mobile handset, it is a multi-device ecosystem. So how the safety and security of the user as well as the entire ecosystems can be aligned to the government strategy or the conformity assessment?
Sachin, do you want to?
I can take it. So when you look at security, it has to be end-to-end first of all, right? Slightest crack in the security means no security. So you may do 10 different things, but leave that small window, people will exploit that. So first of all, the applications, the OS, the hardware platform, all of them need to be secure. A lot of OEMs do that diligently on their own because they work in a global environment and they have to manage different regulations in different countries. So we get benefit of that. To your point, why don't we do it in India? And how do we enable? I think TEC is already looking at it. They are considering various different views and thinking of doing a lightweight, at least, analysis of what can be done as a sort of a mandate, or I wouldn't say a certification process, right? To ensure that at least the major things are taken care of there. But again, security is a very broad and what you call end-to-end, needs to be done end-to-end. Even if the device is secure, but your application is not, you can lose out on certain aspects basically, right? People have to be responsible in terms of usage as well, not to download malware. So there is the education aspect also, right? It's not just the certification, but the education aspect also for the for end user. So TEC is already looking at it, and at some point of time, I guess they will define something for the country.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
All right. So first of all, I want to congratulate the panel. I think we did a wonderful job. Some really hard-hitting questions, but you know, I was reading an article the other day which made me feel so confident about our future because we have, you know, such esteemed subject matter experts, and obviously the confidence in the way that we can actually deliver it for our country is really beaming out. So thanks to the audience as well as for your beautiful questions that you asked. So congratulations to the audience to be so involved, and so thank you for being here. I'll just wrap this up, and we have a little bit of mementos, a little bit of a ceremony for mementos for the panelists. So to summarize, my takeaways are very positive. Okay, so I feel we have the right demand. We are intrinsically motivated as an organization to meet this demand. We have the right ecosystem. The government is putting up the right kind of, is channeling the right kind of incentives, the right plans for the manufacturing OEMs as well as consumers to take advantage of it. The mobility as well as the industry has done the right investments to bring the network out there. We are at a breakneck speed to kind of make sure that we are ahead of the other global counterparts or other countries who are there, which makes me feel that as a country we are in the right direction, in the right at the right place at the right time. There are certain opportunity areas, of course. You know, one of them is of course on the security aspect. Customer experience is a big opportunity area which the panel really threw a lot of light on. There's a lot of opportunity also on the way we are intrinsically managing our manufacturing units or manufacturing areas. Some of these things really need to kind of come up, but the ecosystem is there, and hopefully we'll get there in the right manner. So hence, once again, thank you, the panel. Thank you. Sachin. Okay, so with that, we close the panel, and thank you once again everyone for joining us. Have a great day. Thank you.